What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have an old friend of mine. He was a former intern at the University of Tennessee and then now is doing great things at Lipscomb University. His name is Jonathan Thompson. People typically refer to him, though, as JT, and he is working with Lipscomb University right now as the Director of Sports Performance for basketball. It was really cool to speak with him and then talk about his unique experiences that he had at Tennessee. It was quite a unique time that he went through and what he was able to experience, but then how he translated that into success in his future coaching career, which he's currently going through. So it was great to catch up with him, just to speak with him one-on-one as a friend, but then also for everybody else to hear his experiences and how he's applied them to his career. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have a very special guest to me. I refer to him as JT, but everybody listening to him will know as Jonathan Thompson. He's the Director of Sports Performance for men's basketball at Lipscomb University. JT, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me, Connor.
Oh, absolutely. I'm juiced. JT, well, we'll get into it. Let me not
Yeah,
tell your
right.
story right before I was supposed to do that. So
Don't be
let me go.
stealing
All
my
right.
thunder now.
Exactly. I'm the host. You're the guest. And people are
That's
here for
right.
you. So, can you just give us a background of your career and then what's led you to your current position?
Yeah. So, um, I started out with you in a sense at Tennessee. Going back a few years here. Came in as an intern. I believe that would have been 2019. I think it was.
Yep.
Came in, and that was kind of after I had I had come in and actually toured the facility through a class through UT, and I talked with Dan Worth at Tennessee, the director there, and he kind of pulled me in and said, "Hey, we're looking for people." So I started working as an intern there, and I remember the early process was like, hey, how do we get this done? What are we doing here? I kind of joined it in because I really like sports, but it was also great because one of the early things I'm sure a lot of interns do this too. Maybe I'm the only one, but I mean, the gear was great there. It was awesome. Like you're getting to work with cool people, but like being around y'all was so fun. And it kind of fell in love over the course of the year and a half that I interned there. Um, Went through a lot and started picking and choosing who I was going to be around, which coaches I wanted to shadow under, and kind of found myself wanting to look for multiple different perspectives. I mean, you at the time, you were still doing cheer and dance, right?
Yep.
You
And
were,
cheer.
you were,
Yep.
what was that? Was that a three-peat for y'all, back to back to back national champions or something like that?
That was a
Y'all,
three-peat. But let me be clear, that was in the routine section, which had nothing to do with me.
well, they went through that whole process as an intern there. Kind of worked over in the Olympic side. Started working under Johnny and Roll, and had a lot of fun experiences with both of those guys. And went through the interning process, and it was about a year or so, maybe a year and a half in, where I first met G from over at basketball. And I remember really early on when we were doing our a yearly program project as an intern, one of the first things that you had asked me was like, "Hey, if you were to do a team, what would you want to do?" And I was like, "I
Yep.
for sure want to be basketball." Grew up in Memphis. Basketball was the thing in the city, and so I knew I always wanted to be around basketball in some way. But didn't ever really get the opportunity for that until about a year through. It was funny too. I remember in the internship, we went for about, it was almost a year, and then COVID hit. And it was like
Yep.
a straight year of nothing. Like we didn't go in there. It was the whole summer in through part of the fall. I mean, I was at home. I was trying to text y'all and trying to get in, and like, but it just completely shut down. So I remember when I first came back, I was training with Shaughnessy at that time. You remember Shaughnessy?
I remember Shaughnessy, the
Dude,
big dog.
the big dog. That's right. That's right. So he was intern as well, and we were training out of some random facility on the other side of Knoxville, trying to go in for an Olympic lifting competition at the end of COVID. But we went through that intern process and eventually got connected over with basketball after a period of time of trying to go over there and seeing if I could help. And got connected over there and worked with both the men's and the women's basketball for it was about a year under Garrett at the men, and then it was Brian Tatum at the time who had just come in from Auburn football. So I worked with them, and then about a year after I started working with them, they G connected me with some of the coaches over here at Lipscomb, and that's when I took the job, and here we are 3 years later.
It's electric, man. I love it, and you bring up a lot of very funny memories for me. First of all, just remembering Shaughnessy, I loved
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
For
yeah.
our listeners, it would be if you could take Mr. Clean and the Michelin Man and combine them into a human being, that would be Shaughnessy. He's also the nicest dude ever. But
Awesome.
you bring back a lot of really good memories for me
Hmm.
because I remember that was one of the best times I had in my career, right? And
Hmm.
especially to work with that staff and how varied it was with everybody, with Dan and Roll and Johnny and Barry and Greg, Mr. Boom,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So all these guys brought different perspectives. I thought it was just such a unique spot to be able to go and be a strength coach. For you, like, what were the unique aspects about working at Tennessee? Because there's a couple things I have in mind, and I may even ask the follow-up questions.
Yeah,
But what
yeah,
was
yeah.
unique about it to you?
I think I kind of split in my mind. I split my time as an intern into two different sections. This was my time at Olympics and my time in basketball. Because by the time I got into basketball, I was coming back over for Olympics, but I really kind of had moved more towards that side and helping out with them in the day to day process. So I'll split it up into two different sections there. In Olympics, I think one of the unique, and I'll echo exactly what you said, is there were so many different perspectives within the building, and I think Dan did such a great job. I don't even know how he did it. It's just who he is. He does such a great job of allowing each one of the coaches to, for one, coach the way that they need to coach to be successful, as well as allowing them to bring different things to the table to help the entire organization. And his ability and his humility to allow other coaches to step in and create suggestions for the program as a whole, as well as bring everybody together and have a continual learning process so that you're not just siloing yourself in your sport, you're not just siloing yourself as a coach, but you're constantly interacting and growing and learning. Even as, like, obviously as an intern, I'm learning a million things every second, but even as someone like you who had been there for a few years, Johnny Roll, who had been in the NFL for 21 years, like,
Mm.
he continued to even say, like, I'm still learning and I'm growing. And it created and fostered a community where everybody was rooting for each other and everybody could grow and learn from each other. And there was no, sometimes egos got in the way, mostly my own. But there was such a community aspect. We all loved being around each other, for the most part, at least. And it was such a, to me, it was such a unique um, aspect in that Dan was the key piece to it all, the head honcho, and he made all the wheels spin, and he created that community aspect that that allows for growing and learning and getting better continually. You know.
Well, I agree 1,000%. And just like what was so interesting to me was it like almost ruined my understanding of strength and conditioning, right? Like it was like to me, it was like I thought every staff was like this. Like I thought
Right.
every single staff had somebody like Roll and like Dan
Right.
and everybody fit along. Like it's just so different now that I've been at
Hmm.
different schools and seen
Yeah.
different things and just talked with
Right.
other coaches. It's like so
Right.
clear that the director typically is the one who sets the tone, right? And
Yeah.
so I think a lesson could be learned from Dan is like he knows he sets the tone, so why not let people be themselves? And then you look at the
Right.
turnover rate of his coaches underneath him, and it's non-existent. Like
Right.
he has kept the same strength coaches the entire time he's been there. That's
Yep.
because people get to be who they are and they love being there versus any other school. It's 2 years and everybody else is out.
Right.
And so I thought it was, like you said, a place for growth, a massive growth for everybody.
Mhm.
We were talking before the show, and you said you were curious to see about what I saw out of your
Yeah.
growth process,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
And so I'm going to take this opportunity to show you exactly what I saw. Um, JT came in, and JT was, I think at the time, I would use the word cocky. I would use
Yo,
that to
no
define
doubt.
it, right?
No doubt.
But I think now I would define you as confident. And there's a
Mm.
massive difference in between the two.
Mhm.
And so I remember one time, and I'm sure you remember this too. We were talking about arm pumps
Oh, no
after
doubt.
a workout.
I
Yep.
knew you were gonna bring
And
this up.
yeah, I was going to bring it up. You knew I had to. And we got in a full blown argument
We
about,
did.
I was like, dude, we got to do them. Like, you got to
Right.
do arm pumps. And
Yeah.
you were like, no, there's no purpose behind it.
Right.
And so it was two of us butting heads. But the reason I bring this story up is twofold. One, just to see your growth as a coach, right? And
Mm.
I'm barely older than you, maybe by a year or two, right? But to be able to see you grow and see how you've harnessed your confidence in yourself to then be a successful coach has been amazing, right? And I love
Mm.
seeing it because now when we talk, it's very clear from the language that you use. You're incredibly humble, right? And you have the
Mm.
knowledge base and you have the confidence to be a great coach, but you've harnessed it really well, and so it's made you into a fantastic coach. So that's the
Yeah.
growth I've seen, and that's what I put. But the reason I bring that exact story up too is because we can have a disagreement like that, but it didn't affect our relationship, right?
Right.
And it was an environment where disagreements were actually encouraged
Yeah.
because you were allowed to show your viewpoint. At the end of the day, if you didn't agree on something, it wasn't a big deal. It was like,
Mhm.
okay, let's move on and let's go to the next thing, right?
Yep.
And so I always thought that was super beneficial. You knew I had to bring up the arm
I,
pumps.
I
I
knew
had
you were
to.
gonna bring it up. I knew you were gonna. I was over there talking about edema and pulling in words that I didn't really have any idea what I was talking about. Just try to prove a point.
Yep. And I was
And I,
and I didn't really have science. I just said, man, you got to
right.
blast arms. Like, come on, man. This is a weight room. And I remember
Yeah.
I brought it to Dan, and Dan was like, shut up. Like, he was like, I can't believe, he's like, you can disagree about anything, but shut up. And I was like, all right, all right.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, that was to say the least that I had no idea how to the knowledge I thought was there at the time. Looking back on it, hindsight is always 2020. I clearly had no idea what I was talking about. And I didn't know how to interact with people in that way either.
Mm.
Like it was just, no, this is right. This is wrong. This is right. This is wrong. And you're wrong for thinking this. It's like, now I understand there's a million ways to skin a cat, and people can be successful in a lot of different ways. And I think having those conversations really helped me out a lot. In
Yeah.
in the moment, it didn't seem like it because it was like, why is he doing this? But um, you know, hindsight is always 2020, and you look back at how kind of stupid you were in your internship, and you're like, wow, I actually learned a lot through that. It's like this is pretty crazy.
Right. But that's the
So,
process everybody goes through,
yeah.
and I brought it up too, because I had somebody who shadowed last Friday come back in, and
Mhm.
I was like, I didn't have time to meet with him after. So I was like, hey man, come back in on Wednesday or whatever, and let's talk about it. And he was like, my dad always says, you don't know something until you don't know, or something, some
Exactly.
type
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
You never
and
know
so,
what you don't know.
yes, there you go. Thank you for saying
That's
it way better
that's an
than I
old
possibly could.
rollism. That's an
Oh,
old
there you go.
rollism
There you
right
go.
there. Yeah.
And so he was asking me about that, and he said, "So what do you think I don't know?" And I just
Yeah.
was like everything, like
Mm.
for being honest. And I was like, right now, I probably have maybe 2% of the knowledge that you could possibly possess within strength and conditioning, and so that's inherently understood amongst coaches, right? But what I loved about you is you just wanted to be great, like that's where it was coming from. That was the place it was coming from, and now it's harnessed in such a positive way. So I love to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
That was a
go
hard
ahead.
lesson to learn on that one.
Well, we've all had our hard lessons. My
No
hard
doubt.
lesson to learn was
No
that
doubt.
you can't just fly by the seam of your pants every single day. You kind of have to plan. So we can dive into that a little bit later. But okay, so you talk about separating into two parts. We have the Olympic side.
Mm.
So what was unique
Yeah.
to you about your basketball side of your experience?
Man, that whole experience, there's so many unique things. Probably the most unique, or I don't know if most unique is the right word. Certainly a different piece of my internship over in basketball. Getting to work under a coach like Garrett is like there. I'll say this a million times over. There's no one better than him. Like he is so incredible at what he does, not just from a programming standpoint, but from understanding movement, understanding basketball, understanding how to deal with people. I mean, he taught me so much about how to deal with people, how to deal with coaches, how to talk to coaches, how to relay information. How do you relay information to your athletes? I mean, I was there were so many hours that I spent just day in and day out with him, not even in the coaching aspect, just talking with him.
Mm.
So my time with him like was so incredible. Outside, I mean, when I was over with the women, the probably the most unique aspect of that year that most people don't get to experience is that Brian Tatum. I love him. He's so incredibly awesome, an incredible coach, incredible man. During that period of time, it was about a month after he got there, he was actually diagnosed with cancer, and during that period of time, he went through chemotherapy. And so, as the intern, I had had a little bit of experience. I was working with both sides, the men's and the women's. He wanted me to travel with the team in his stead during that time because he wasn't able to. And so, I mean, I'm sitting there. I had just gone over to basketball. I'm almost 2 years into interning. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know how to talk to coaches. I really don't know what's going on in the strength and conditioning world. I thought I did. Looking back, hindsight is always 2020. But I got the opportunity to travel with the women's basketball team and be their strength coach for an entire semester. And so I think during that period of time, I saw the most growth in that aspect of being able to relay information and interact with people in a more professional manner because that was my every single day. I'm on the road with them. Coach, Tatum is calling me saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to do in the weight room. This is what you need to talk to Cassie about, our ATC at the time. This is the information that you need to talk with coach about. How do you get the girls to do what they need to be doing in the weight room? How do you relay that information to Coach Harper at the time?" I mean, that whole semester was just so incredibly unique in the sense that there's not very many interns that get to say that they travel with Tennessee Lady Vols women's basketball for a whole semester and be their strength coach as an intern. Like that was so incredible just to experience. And I learned so much through that time. That was an incredibly unique experience, and that
Yeah.
there's nothing that I would trade in the world because that was the epitome of trial by fire. It was like, all right, I'm over there, and the girls aren't doing what I'm wanting them to do in the weight room. How do you handle it? Well, there's no other coach around. You're the strength coach. You got to figure it out. And so that trial by fire and just throwing yourself in the ring at it, I failed and I messed up so many times in that semester. And the great part about it was that the coaches were so good. They understood that I was not their strength coach and that I was going to mess up. But as long as we kept moving in the right direction, then I was still allowed to be around. So I couldn't count on five hands the amount of times that I failed and messed up during that period of time. But the growth that I saw from it, and the ability to just be around and have that experience was just incredible.
Well, that was especially what I wanted to talk about with you because I remember going to Texas Tech, and then I was watching, and I'm good buddies with Ty Watson, the
Yeah.
former strength coach there, right before Brian, and so I was talking with Ty, and I turned on a Tennessee game, and I was like, "Bro, is that JT at the end of the bench?" I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "This guy's running women's basketball," and so we had a conversation about it. I had no
Yeah.
clue, like, and
Hmm.
and that was literally my first thought was like I was over at Texas Tech running my first season with women's basketball, and I was
Yep.
getting, oh man, if I could curse, just destroyed every day, right? Like, and just like trying to learn these things, understand
Yep.
it. And I had the
Yep.
extra experience, and I was like, I couldn't even imagine. being
Hmm.
an intern in that position and then
Hmm.
having to go through,
Yep.
and so I trial by fire is the perfect term for it. That's a
Yep.
1000% it, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's a situation where it's not necessary for everybody, right? But I do think at the end of the day, if you're a coach who's meant to be in this profession, you go through something like that, right? You either live with it and
Hmm.
and understand the process of getting better, or you quit,
Right.
because there's a lot of people who go through that and they'd end up quitting.
Yep.
And so I commend you for that big time, because
Yeah.
again, I'm like watching the game, I'm like, bro, this is like the Vols, like this is the
Yeah.
Lady Vols. We've got a statue of Pat Summitt right out to the side,
Yep.
and then you're working for Kelly Harper, who played for
Yep.
Pat Summitt. Like it
Yep.
was just an insane process. So kudos to you for doing that. Is
Yeah.
there any specific instance that you can think about that you really grew from, or anything that you can take from it that you really were like, man, that was crucial for me?
Yeah. There are so many. One of them stuck out, and this is what I say to that whole process too. Is something that Garrett taught me while I was over with the men. Um, he always, people tend to think, myself at the forefront of this list, is that, I wish I could go through life and learn all these great lessons without having to experience the failure. It's like life would be so great if I never had to go through
Yeah.
hardship and I could still experience, the learning process. But one of the things that he taught me in going through that process in particular was, like, not only is it important for you to fail and go through adversity, it's actually really the only way that you can really truly learn. It's like you don't ever really know until you've gone through it and failed and experienced and grown and learned from it. And
Mm.
so that his thought process on that helped me so much through that period of time, because there was one particular instance, and I have to plead the fifth in some case on this one. We were in the weight room, and I had no idea how to handle a team in a weight room. It was all 16 of the girls in there at once. And we were finishing out, some type of arm farm circuit at the end of a week or something like that in the preseason. And they were doing a certain amount of reps, and we were pairing it with two other things. One of them was on the Kaiser, the other was on the opposite arm of the Kaiser, and then there was one other spot. And I just remember we were going through it, and I was trying to explain the process of going from one spot to the next spot to the next spot, all back to back to back, and everybody was
Yep.
following each other, and we're just going to keep it rolling. And I explained it so poorly that nobody had any idea what was going on. And it was the epitome of the worst possible flow in a workout I've ever seen or experienced. And we got through the first round, and it was so completely messed up that everybody's like, "What are we doing?" They were active like, "What are we doing? Why are we doing this? What are we doing?" And I was getting so angry and I couldn't help myself, because I was just trying to make it work, and I didn't have the words to explain, or the coaching
Yep.
experience to explain it. And I remember we ended up cutting the end of the lift. It took us about 10 minutes to go through this and explain this. And I got so angry, I cut the end of the lift. And the girl, we were having this whole argument back and forth. And it was such a poor experience for them. And I feel so bad for them, because my anger at myself in that situation was coming out at them. And that was such a poor experience for them. And if any of them are listening right now, which I don't think they will, I apologize for that instance. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It was just a really poor reflection of how I was able to handle the situation.
Mm.
And I remember having to go and talk with Kelly and one of the assistant coaches about it, because the girls went and talked with them about it. And I was like, man, this is what happened. This is what's going on. I messed it up. This is what happened. The girls were doing this. And it's like, whoa, 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 just like slow down, chill out. Like, it's okay. Like, these things happen. And they were so good about understanding where I was in that instance. And I appreciate them so much for that, because, I mean, it's hard to explain exactly what was going on, but I did such a poor job of coaching this circuit up that I literally just cut the end of the lift, and we went about our day. It was really bad.
But you pulled an extremely important lesson from it, right? And
No
the
doubt.
first, yeah. the first piece is you can't allow your frustrations to affect your coaching, right?
Right.
And that's it's honestly one of the first things I teach interns here is like, hey man, like, at the end of the day, like nobody knows if you messed up on something, right? Like it could
Right.
go kind of clunky, it could not be great, but like you're the one who knows how it was 100% supposed to look. And so, you just got to be confident and play it off like you knew exactly how it was. And obviously in a
Yep.
situation where if it's the worst flow you've ever seen,
Man, it's
maybe it's
bad.
a little
It was
tough to
bad.
pull it off.
It was bad.
But
No, it was not getting to the end. I tell you that there was no way. But I mean, you're exactly right. It was such a learning moment for me, being a little bit more self aware, looking back on it, and it's just I learned so much from that particular instance. Of just it was a great challenge for me to overcome.
it's a blessing in disguise too.
No doubt,
Like like you
no doubt.
said, the failure is the best teacher, and you in the moment it
Mhm.
feels like it sucks. Like
Yep.
you're just like, I can't get this right. I don't know why
Mhm.
this isn't going my way, and everything. And then you also got to. It's really hard to take a step back when you're that young too, to be like, I've been doing this shit for like I did cussify. Sorry, Stephanie, our amazing editor. I it's so hard to take a step back and just be like, I've only been doing this for a year. Like,
Yep.
how am I supposed to be great? And then you've
Yep.
got guys like Dan, you've got guys like G who have been doing it forever and
Right.
have it all polished. And so you
Yep.
play this game of comparison. It's just so
Mhm.
tough. And so
Yep.
you talked about G helping you understand the process of failure and how to get better.
Mhm.
How else did you stay positive during this process? Because it's hard, like when you want to be the best
Yep.
and it just isn't coming to fruition at that point in time.
Yep. Yep. I knew that during that period of time, I had to continue to remind myself, like you just says, like I've only been, I really haven't even been doing this for a year. Like I've
Yeah.
been watching for 2 years. I haven't been coaching for 2 years. And so I'd had a little bit of experience on the side during that time, but I had to keep reminding myself that there's grace for all of that. And like at that point, I was 21 or 22, and I was going through this process that literally I would put all my money on the line that there was nobody in the country that was doing that at that period of time.
No.
And like just to think about the fact that I could be 21 and traveling with the Lady Vols as their strength coach put everything back into perspective to understand like this is an incredible blessing, and it's going to set me up for so much more success when everything really is on the line. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, if stuff had gone poorly that year, it wasn't going to be my job on the line. And so,
No.
as poor as that may sound to say, is like I did have freedom to work under the reins of Brian and him allowing me to be there and do those things and communicate with him, to where now 2 or 3 years down the line, I've learned some of those initial really poor examples of how to coach, and I can change that. And so I just had to keep reminding myself that there was so many more years down the line to be able to do everything right and to be able to continue to learn and to be great at this, as well as being under mentors like G, like Brian, like Dan, like yourself, Johnny, and Roll. I mean, not to mention Barry and Greg as well. Um, to be under those kinds of coaches, I knew that if I just stuck with it, the word that continued to come through my mind through that period of time was just endure, endure,
Mm.
endure. Just keep going, just keep going, just keep going. Like you just have to figure out a way to make it work, and I didn't realize it at the time. And again, hindsight's 2020 in all of this. You go back and you look that everybody's journey is going to be so incredibly different and unique. And I wanted to make my journey like yours, like Johnny's, like G's, like Dan's, like Roll's, like Greg's, like Barry's. And that's just not the way that it works. Like you have to stick with your story and be okay with deviating from what your ideal concept is in your mind of how things are supposed to be going. If you don't, you're gonna quit. Like it's just not gonna work. You have to be flexible and you have to be adaptable. So I had to remind myself of all those things. Like you have great mentors around you. You're in a position that very few people are in, at this point in their career. You've learned so much. You do have the willpower to keep going. Like, I know these things about myself. I can keep going. And at the end of the day, once I kind of understood that, it became a lot more fun. Like, it just
Mm.
became something that I enjoyed so much more, rather than trying to force myself through a cubby hole of this is how it gets done. And if it doesn't, I just get angry. So once I learned to let go of a few of those things, and understand that my process was not going to be the same as everybody else's process, it's going to look different, and I'm going to get embarrassed sometimes, then you can learn to let some of that stuff go.
Man, that's amazing. That's a fantastic just approach and just viewpoint. And seriously, I mean, I love the word endure, right? Because I feel like every strength coach I've spoken with has that time. Like there's a time where it was time for them to endure. And I even
Mhm.
mentioned it earlier, it's time where some people leave and some people stay. And unfortunately, there are some people who I think would be really good coaches who end up leaving because they don't keep the bigger picture in mind, right? And
Yeah.
there's always the bigger picture. And so it's so interesting for me, and it's kind of a big theme of this podcast too, is to watch young coaches leave the profession. Like, why is there a lack of durability? Why will they not endure the process of getting better? Because sometimes I think it takes a lot of vulnerability as well too, and some people just
Yeah.
aren't willing to be vulnerable. They aren't willing to suck. Like
Yeah.
you've just
Yep.
everybody
No
sucked at
doubt.
some point,
A
you know.
100%. A hundred
And,
percent.
and
I
so if
completely agree with that.
if you just stick with it, you can get exactly where you wanted, right? And I
Right.
do really appreciate you bringing up the non-linear journey as well, too, right? Because even it's a good reminder for me because even when we talk with our GAs, we talk with our interns, okay, you're going to get your GA and then you're going to go get your first full-time job.
Right.
You'll probably make about this much money. You'll probably go next to this job here, or even what my next position will be or what things will look like, right? It's
Mhm.
always based off of, okay, this is probably most likely what will happen. But same thing with me. Like I'm at Tennessee one day and I was on a beach and Greg calls me. He's like, "Do you want Texas Tech women's basketball?" And I was like, "Ha ha, like you're so funny, Greg." He's like, "No, I'm dead serious." And I was like, "What?" So,
What are you
like it
talking
was just
about?
this complete, yeah, exactly. It's just completely non-linear process. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate that understanding of that too, because I think if you grow and you know that it's not linear, you can accept a change a lot more, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Well, I appreciate that greatly, and I think a lot of our listeners will appreciate that perspective too, because it's always good to take a bigger step back and look at the bigger picture. Now let's move on from the time at Tennessee, right? Because there has been a lot of growth. Like,
Right.
what do you feel like you have seen the most growth in yourself, and what do you enjoy about working at Lipscomb with the
Mhm.
basketball team there now?
Yeah. I'll start it off by saying the I appreciate so much about Lipscomb, in so many ways, nothing less than the people who are here. If you ever get the chance to be around Lipscomb, especially athletics is where I'm mostly around. The people here are next to none in the way that they treat you, in the way that they love you. There's such an air of community at Lipscomb in such a unique way, more so than I've experienced anywhere else. I mean, Tennessee was a community in its own unique way, and every community is unique, and this particular uniqueness is unique, in the truest sense of the word. It seems like a bastion of love for people, and that's the basis at which everybody operates from. And so when I first got the call about this job, I came in. It was a very interesting process for interviews. I went on one Zoom call interview. They wanted me back for a second one, so I came in for an in-person interview. And my third interview was actually me coaching the team through a lift, which was really fun. And I thought, for a coach to think that one through was like so far and away further than I thought any coach would take it. And so it was really fun during that process to come in here and meet the coaches, and for them to see a 23-year-old coach college athletes who, at the time, I had an athlete who was my age.
Oh wow.
Asana Sajala was our big man my first year here, and he was 23 when I came in and got the job. And so I went through that process with them in meeting the coaches, and for coach to take a chance on me as a 23-year-old was it was humbling to say the least, because I know that he brought in other good prospects as well, and he was willing to take someone who had no official experience at all, based off of what he saw in the weight room and based off of interviews, and that was such a humbling process to go through and talk with the coaches through all that stuff, especially now as you go back and talk with them about that process a couple years later. Um, that being able to see how, and this is where I'll kind of answer that question in that roundabout way. Um, Being able to see that athletics is not just and it doesn't have to be a completely cutthroat business, and you can still be successful in it, has been very eye opening for me, because the way that we deal with our kids and the way that we deal with our athletes and the students here, we've had good success in the last few years. We still are wanting to keep pushing forward with more success, but the way that coach in particular deals with the relationships with the athletes and how he can garner success. I mean, he during his time in D2, he spent 22 years at Alabama Huntsville and won 11 conference championships. I mean,
Wow.
that's incredible between tournaments and regular season. That's
Yeah.
incredible. And to be around a coach who cares so much about the people around him, his athletes, his staff, the people in athletics. It's incredible just to see every day how he handles situations. And so it's really fun, and I've grown so much in that exact way. And I think, I'm a Christian. I believe that God sent me here for a reason, and it goes back to exactly what we talked about at the beginning. Of I had no idea how to handle talking with people. I had no idea how to relate to people in the professional setting. I had no idea how to handle those conversations, and being at Tennessee and then moving here has helped me so much in that specific particular way. And I just can't help but think how beautiful that whole plan is in the grand scheme of things. And it's really cool to see. But that, in a roundabout way, that's been the thing that I've seen the most growth in myself, is that understanding that, we are here to win and we're going to push to win, and you can also push to win and be good to people and have great relationships with your athletes. It doesn't have to just be completely cutthroat. When it needs to be, it can be, but it doesn't have to be like that all the time. You know, so that's been awesome to see, and that's been my biggest takeaway from being here for the last 2 years.
It's funny how those things work out, right? The things that
Yep.
you need to grow in the most, sometimes you
Yep.
get put in the position to
Yep.
do exactly that.
Yep.
And I think that's such a great point too, because at the end of the day, you know, coaches are judged based off of wins and losses, right?
Right.
If you lose consistently, you're going to get fired.
Yep.
But there is a way to win while
Hmm.
caring about people as well too.
Yep.
And so I think that's so funny, because sometimes you end up with coaches who, maybe it just is about the bottom line. Are we winning or losing? And let's do anything that it takes to win. And those coaches win too. It
Yep.
happens, there's no doubt. But I would much rather be for a coach and be with a coach who cares and wants to see people develop and wants to see the relationships develop, and wants to do it the right way, because it just makes every day so much more fulfilling. Like, you come in every day and it's not like, oh man, what is the problem going to be today? What do we have to address today? Right. It's like, we know we get to actually experience and, watch people grow and watch people get better and watch people feel fulfilled. And that's why I do the job. And I'm sure that's the same way
Yep.
you do that too, right? It's
Yep.
not because I get to, watch wins on the sideline. Like, that part's cool, but to me, that's the product of the process. And the process
Yep.
is what you do every day. So it's got to be something that you love.
Yep, no doubt, no doubt, and it's an awesome feeling, being around people like that, and to be able to that even goes into being able to really coach somebody. Like you have to have a good relationship with someone and able to get everything out of them. Like you only, in my opinion, in my experience, you're only going to get so far just yelling and screaming and pushing somebody and forcing them to do something. Ultimately, you don't get everything out of them unless you have that base relationship, that base understanding between the two of you, that there is love and that I care about you, and that ultimately if I'm requiring you to do this, then I'm going to be doing it myself. And ultimately it's because I want to see what's absolutely best out of you. And that's the bottom line. It comes from no other place than love and wanting to see you be successful.
And you look
Even
at
when you
how
don't like
somebody, yeah, yeah, sometimes.
it.
But you look at how somebody like GE coaches, right? Like from an outsider's
Yeah.
perspective,
Hmm.
it's like this guy's militant and this
Yep.
guy, is super aggressive, right?
Yep.
But he builds the relationships so that he can
Hmm.
coach them like that,
Yep.
right? Everybody counting out reps at the same time,
Yep.
everybody performing the reps and the perfectly
Yep.
exactly how they're supposed to be. Like,
Hmm.
it's one of those things where if you don't develop those relationships, you're just a total asshole. But then if you
Exactly.
do develop those relationships, you're somebody who really cares, and the athletes can see that process. And
Yep.
10 times out of 10, they come back and thank you later for it because
Yep.
they knew it was coming from a place of love. And
Yep.
so it's so interesting. And I only bring up G in that example. A lot of coaches do that too, right? But
Hmm.
because that's who you've learned from, right? And
Right.
it's tough, like, because I'm sure and everybody listening here too has had those examples of times where
Hmm.
you try to take something that a mentor did without the relationship aspect, and all of
Yep.
a sudden
Right.
you look like
Yep.
an idiot. And
Yep.
but then you get the relationship piece in, and it makes all the difference. And
Yep.
that's what all the older coaches say too. All the young coaches care about programming. All the
Right.
older coaches always talk about relationships.
Yep. Yep.
I feel
It's
like if
fun.
you want
It's
to stick
funny
around,
how old people are usually pretty smart if
yeah,
they've been around
yes.
for that long. You know.
I was just about to say, right?
Yep.
If somebody sticks around, maybe you should probably listen to them.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yep. And that's another lesson that I learned through Garrett too, is that you know people on the outside looking in are always going to have something to say. Like they're always going to have something to say because they don't understand what really goes on.
Yep.
And so taking your advice, having the right environment around you and having what Garrett calls your circle, it is the five closest people to you, the people that are around you that influence you the most. You have to be so particular in who you choose those five people to be, because ultimately they're going to have the greatest influence on you in your life. And if they have an outsider's perspective and don't really truly understand what's going on, they may be giving you advice that's really poor advice
Mm,
if they had only stepped into the ring with you and understood the situation. And so that, like, I've taken so much from Garrett in that way in particular. Is like, look, man, I do things a lot of ways that when recruits come by, they're like, oh, why are you doing that? Or, our guys initially, when they first come in, they're like, why are we doing it this way? And over time, you have that relationship, you build that thing up, and you explain and you allow them to see the end product, and it all kind of clicks. And I'm sure it's the same for you as it is for me. When you have an athlete that has that moment where everything just clicks and you can see it in their eyes, that is the most gratifying process. That is everything that I do this for. It is just for that one moment of, oh, I get it. Like, I see the process now. I see how this is helpful. And that's it's such a blessing when you get to see that kind of stuff. Sometimes you miss it.
yep.
So you got to be so, you got to pay so much attention to it, or else you might miss it. But when you do get to see it, man, there's nothing quite like having your athletes have that light bulb moment of just flipping the switch. I can do this. Like, I can be successful. Like, it's so incredible.
And that's yeah, like you said, that's the reason you do it, right? That's the reason you get out of
Yep.
bed every day and you go to do
Yep.
this job, right?
Yep.
And it's I truly say, like, I couldn't do another job. Like, I don't see what I could do outside of
Yep.
this. Like, um, besides be a stay-at-home dad, I'd love to be a trophy husband, but but you still get to coach your kids, right?
Right. There you
And
go.
so
There
at
you
the end of
go.
the day, it's the process of getting better, and that's just what's so fun about it. And
Yeah.
it's everybody has their own style, but if you really care about the athletes, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And they know
No
that, and
doubt.
they can see that. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes they don't see it, and that's okay.
So well, yeah, there you go.
That's okay
In
too.
reflection, they'll see
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Yep.
I actually had that conversation with one of our coaches the other day too. Is just kind of talking, thought process on coaching and how that all works, and the gratification of 4 years down the line when someone comes back to you and says, I hated your guts while we were doing this, but now I see exactly why, and you've helped me do X, Y, and Z through that process. And that's such a incredible experience. Like there's nothing quite like it. I mean, winning is great, and they say winning is a drug, but you have one of those moments with one of your athletes. One athlete can do you for a lifetime of
Oh
coaching.
yeah.
Like it's so incredible.
Those are probably even more my favorite, right?
Yeah.
Because I know when people don't like me, because
Yep.
I can be an
Yep.
acquired taste,
Yep.
and so when I know when people don't, and I love to get them even worse, right?
Yep.
And make them really.
Yep.
I'm like, all right, if you're not going to
Yeah.
like me, you're really
Hey,
not
come
going to
on.
like me,
Bring
right?
it
But I still
on.
care about you.
That's right.
So
That's right.
those ones always get me the happiest. I'm like, I know
Yeah.
you hated me, I
Yeah.
know, but at the end of the day, we got better, right? We both
Yeah.
did together.
Yep. Yep. No doubt. That's an incredible process.
Yeah. Well, JT, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's been exceptional to speak with you. But then again, just go through such a great reflection process as well, too. That's always exciting for me. And I leave these conversations very renewed with energy, right? And to
Yeah.
be able to even do a little bit of reflection on my own. So, and thank you again, once again, for bringing up Shaughnessy. I forgot about
Yeah.
Shaughnessy,
Yeah.
and,
That's
and
right.
I'm
That's
going to
right.
reach out to him right after the
Yeah.
show just to
He
say what's
texted
up.
me the other day. That's why he was on my brain.
Yep.
I had forgotten, and he just texted, and he was actually doing some stuff up in Kentucky. Like
He
he was
was in
doing
like
some
Korea or
work.
something for a while,
Well, he's
right?
still
Yeah.
in Korea, but he came
Uh,
back and he's doing like work in Kentucky in the summers. Then he goes back. Like
Shug,
he's a hustler. He's a hustler.
Shug
That's right.
Nasty, the
That's right.
animal.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, if anybody listens, wants to reach out or wants to follow you on social media, what would be the best way to do that?
Uh, I have Instagram is Coach JT underscore. That's where most people will reach out to me. I also have a LinkedIn, but email, Thompson at lipscomb.edu. It's on our website. Any questions that anybody has. And before we go, I'd also like just say thank you to you. I mean, this being able to see you go through this process of with Samson, and we talked about this the other day on the phone, like just kind of taking it up and going for it, like it's given me a lot of confidence to be able to pursue outside things that I originally hadn't thought that I would ever get into. And so it's cool to see and be able to reconnect and talk through these things. And like your process has been so fun to watch too. So I appreciate you and you having me on too.
Well, it's a whole room of appreciation because
That's
I
right.
appreciate that, and I mean, seriously, it's been a fun adventure, and we talked about. I was like, man, you should look into podcasting. Like, and I
Yeah,
don't, I don't know what your
right.
future looks like, but I will say, it's always super fun. Like, I leave every conversation, like, no matter what I came in with, what mindset, I leave just juiced. Like, it's like
Yeah,
always just like, yeah, man, that was exactly why I do this podcast.
that's
That's
right.
exactly why I coach. So
Ready to
I
go hit a
love it.
little arm farm.
And I'm going to go hit an arm farm. I promise you, an honor. And don't think I didn't hear about that Tennessee arm farm that you hit in there just a
No
little bit.
doubt.
All
No doubt. No doubt.
right.
No
Well,
doubt.
JT, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.